Well, thank you, Kyle, and good afternoon, everyone. And it's great to be with you today, although via video format. I did see on Twitter earlier today that there was a South Florida judge who had to issue an order directing that all attorneys who are appearing via video put on a shirt and not be in bed when they're appearing in court on video. So I thought with that bar set sufficiently low, I could still talk to you today, and I am fully clothed, by the way, but talk to you today from the DA's office. And I really do want to start by just emphasizing that I hope you and your loved ones are doing okay. I recognize we're going through a really difficult time, and that impacts our personal lives, but also our professional lives and the justice system as a whole. So I appreciate Kyle and Laura inviting me to talk to you today about how the justice system has responded to COVID-19, at least from the perspective of the DA's office. And as Kyle mentioned, I'm happy to take any questions you have, and I'll try to keep up if you're putting them on chat. I'll keep my eye on that, or at the end, we'll open up the microphones, and if people have questions, I certainly, as always, welcome those. I will say, as we respond to the coronavirus and the impact it's had on the justice system, I have a lot of memories of 9/11 because I was in downtown Manhattan at the DA's office there as a prosecutor, working on the morning of 9/11 and about to actually give an opening statement in a violent robbery trial. Of course, the opening did not happen on that day, and our lives, all of our lives, were changed forever after that. But I think often about how the justice system responded there, how the DA's office that I was a part of responded there. And in some ways, those memories are informative, relevant, and in other ways, it's a completely different situation, right? Because here with this virus, I think there's a ongoing anxiety and uncertainty that continues every single day, and that people are nervous and stressed, and it impacts those that we serve, it impacts your clients, it impacts victims, our staff. So I think that as we continue to work through this together, it's going to be a transition for all of us, and it's going to be a long road, and I fully and 100% believe we're going to get through it. It's just a matter of how we get through it and what we're able to do to help and to support those that we serve as we go through this process. So regardless of what kind of law you practice, or whether you're helping victims or clients or criminally charged individuals, really to me, being an attorney right now is more important than ever because of the opportunity we have to impact the lives of others and to help them through this difficult time, even as we ourselves have to deal with it. So I really do want to start by stressing that I hope you and your loved ones are doing okay. And I recognize that it's a stressful period for a lot of people. And hopefully this presentation, as we go through it, will give us more thoughts on how we can make sure that we're all managing this transition well, particularly here in the justice system. So I'm going to touch on a brief overview of the presentation and then take you through some of the things we've done here in the DA's office. I will share with you that we have most of our staff working remotely. As you may know, we have 90 members of staff here in the district attorney's office. We have a small group that comes into the office every day, but most folks are working remotely, and that's been helped by the fact that our attorneys are appearing via video for the jail and for district court, county court dockets, and I'll talk more about that in a little while. But I'm grateful that we're able to get people, we move very quickly as an office and as a courthouse. We move very quickly to get people up and running at home and working remotely. And that, from my perspective, for our office has been really successful. What I mean by that is our staff have the resources they need at home, both in terms of the IT support, but just resources generally to be able to stay on top of the work that is coming into the courthouse and incoming work for the justice system, as well as staying in touch with the people in our cases. So when we first started this response to the virus, we identified a number of priorities. One was to maintain community safety. Another was to protect victims in cases, both cases that are ongoing and pending, but also cases that are coming to us now. In other words, offenses that are being committed during this crisis period. Also joining in the effort, along with the public defender's office, the sheriff's office, and the courts, to reduce the need for individuals to attend court hearings or trials. And then the reduction in the jail population, and that's something we focused a lot of energy on as well, right from the very beginning. And I'll be talking about all four of these areas today, and then again, happy to take any questions that you have as we go through it. So in terms of overall lessons that I'm really interested to see what we take from this crisis, I will say When I think about 9/11 or other things that have disrupted the justice system, the floods being another example, I think there are opportunities to learn from a period like this. It's really a time for us to reset and reevaluate as individuals, as a justice system, and as a community. So to me, I want to make sure that we identify what we could do better going forward, whether it be efficiencies or just wholesale changes to the justice system and overall philosophy and approach. Different things that we learned from this period of crisis, that if there are positives to be taken from it, that we use this opportunity to identify those and to implement them going forward. And I really mean that in our own lives. We'll all figure that out on an individual level and with our loved ones, but also as a justice system and as a community. So we've been thinking a lot about changes we can make within the office, what we could do more of with the video systems that we've been using pretty effectively now, what we could do better to stay in touch with individuals, not only on staff, but also attorneys and the individuals in our cases. And then also in terms of how we handle the charging of individuals, what we do with those cases, and what the jail population looks like as a whole. I think those are all areas that I'm certainly committed to looking at, and I imagine many of you in your respective areas are thinking about as we move forward from this crisis and after it passes, which it will. How do we want to take what we've learned through this process and implement? I know all of us just want to get through it, and I certainly agree with that, but I try to think about what we can identify here in the DA's office and the justice system as a whole that we want to take with us going forward. And I'll just touch very quickly on two examples that come to mind when I say that. We've had very, very low arrest rates since the crisis started, and there are reasons for that. There are systems that we put in place to control the number of people being arrested. And we've greatly reduced the jail population in Boulder County. That should prompt us to think about how we go about our business every day. What does it say about it? And that remains to be determined, and I'll be really interested to look at the data behind those questions to see what happens during this period and what the outcomes are. And then I look also at the press release that the Boulder Police Department sent out yesterday, and you see the numbers there on the slide, but from March 1st to April 10th of this year, far more burglary reports in the city of Boulder than there were for the same time period last year. What does that say? What does that mean? I think these are questions that don't have an easy answer necessarily, or one right answer, but these are the kinds of things we should look at, that I will certainly look at, to determine what we can learn from this crisis and what we could take going forward. So in terms of community safety, from the very beginning, as a district attorney's office, we were really committed to working closely with law enforcement and treatment providers in the community to make sure that community safety was not jeopardized or endangered through this crisis. So we've been working closely with, as I say, law enforcement and treatment providers, both of whom are still available and working, of course. And I want to recognize that healthcare workers, law enforcement, other first responders are still out there every day serving the public, while many of us are working from home or hunkering down, and that's the right thing to do during this health crisis. But I respect and appreciate the work that law enforcement is doing out there in the community. And of course, the healthcare professionals who are working directly with people who are sick and struggling. In terms of community safety, we've done a number of things. We focused on domestic violence and abuse as an area for concern. We've done that for a few reasons. First, when people are isolated and going through stressful times, those tend to be factors that could lead to violence in a relationship, violence in a home. And importantly here, the isolation piece means that the normal outlets that someone has for help are cut off from them. So what do I mean by that? Let's say, for example, you have a child who's being sexually assaulted or physically abused in the home. As you know, teachers, educators are mandated reporters. We don't have our kids going to school right now. So we've cut off any opportunity for people to help identify signs of abuse and to report that abuse to the authorities. Also, similarly, for domestic violence victims who might be able to turn to a colleague at work, a friend, a hairstylist, you name it, all those things are being cut off from people right now because the stay-at-home orders. So we've been really focused on domestic violence and abuse and what we could do to help prevent it from happening, reduce the odds of it happening, but also communicate with victims that law enforcement, the DA's office, and treatment providers remain available to assist if they're trapped in that kind of situation, and to make sure they realize that the resources available to them exist even throughout this crisis. So for those of you who may know someone who's in such a relationship, you should be checking in. I would ask that you check in with your loved ones and your neighbors, and to contact us or contact law enforcement if there's something that could be done to help individuals. And I think this is an area where we're going to continue to focus a lot of our energy here in the DA's office. We've done a number of things through the media, social media, reaching out to community groups directly, but this is something we want the community to know about, because as you know, domestic violence can happen in any home, and Boulder County, although an amazing place and beautiful place to live, is not immune from domestic violence. So we've been trying to get the word out to victims and community members about this and make sure that people understand that we are here and available to assist if anything does happen. Not surprisingly, some of the countries and states that are further along on the timetable of the virus hitting them than Colorado, in other words, the virus hit them earlier than it hit us, have seen surges in domestic violence calls and domestic violence reports as the crisis has gone on. Hopefully we don't have that here in Boulder County, but I have every reason to believe it will when I think about the factors at play. That being isolation for individuals, people being in one place for long periods of time, and if the person they're with is their abuser, you can imagine, particularly at a time of high stress for people, not just stress about the pandemic, but stress about financial impact as well. So all those things factor into us being really concerned about domestic violence and abuse. So we've put out a lot of information. We've put out flyers for individuals. There's a flyer available on our website and on our Facebook page, and you can share this information. Perhaps most importantly for your purposes, there's resources listed on the side of that flyer on the right-hand side that detail where someone can go for treatment and support during this time. Also under the heading of community safety is communicating with Boulder County about the stay-at-home orders. So obviously we want people to stay home and stay healthy. I've talked about domestic violence and abuse already, but I would highlight under this heading that domestic violence victims can leave their homes, and Governor Polis actually touched on this earlier this week, and I thought it was great he did so. I think it's an important message to get out there. And we've been trying to, along with Boulder County law enforcement, inform the community about the stay-at-home orders. There's a flyer on our website for that as well, which has a number of different details. And if you have friends or neighbors who are curious about the stay-at-home orders, or who are concerned that they're seeing violations of the stay-at-home orders, there's information on that flyer as to what the order requires, and then also what's recommended, but also the resources that are available if people want to call public health and call law enforcement to inform them about concerns they have about the stay-at-home orders. The public health folks for Boulder County receive and document all the calls they get. These calls vary, of course, ranging from neighborhood kids, too many of them together in one spot, to college party going on, to unhealthy practices at a restaurant, you name it. Public health is getting these calls right now. From the perspective of law enforcement, and certainly from the district attorney's office, our goal is to make sure people are educated and informed about the stay-at-home orders. To me, arresting or citing someone for violating the stay-at-home order should be a last resort. The goal is for law enforcement, and this is on the flyer that law enforcement and I sent out to the community, the goal for law enforcement is voluntary compliance, and it's only if someone deliberately fails to comply with the stay-at-home order after being informed about it, then law enforcement would seek to charge the individual. A couple of things we've been trying to highlight, particularly because I received requests from our immigrant communities. One is that paperwork is not required to demonstrate that someone's traveling to an essential function or essential activity. So there are some employers, for example, Boulder County has offered their employees letters that state they are an employee working an essential function. If the employee wants to obtain the letter, they can, but it's not required. So if you have clients or community members who are wondering, there's no requirement that paperwork be produced. law enforcement is not stopping individuals to check if they have paperwork or to see where they're going or why they're going to a certain location. Also, Boulder County law enforcement will not collect or share any data from conversations or from public health reports with ICE. So we shared that with our immigrant community advocates, and they've been getting the word out throughout the community. And it's something I wanted to touch on in the conversation with you today, because I want to make sure that people understand, at least in Boulder County, the approach to the stay-at-home orders. We certainly hope they're complied with, but it's not something where law enforcement is stopping and checking on individuals, nor do they want to be in a position where they have to charge or arrest anybody for violating the stay-at-home orders. So tenants and housing providers. This is a little outside my lane as district attorney, but we put together a resource page because we were getting a lot of requests from law enforcement, from the city of Boulder, and from some other public agencies that there was some confusion around the rights of tenants and what housing providers can and cannot be doing during this time period. So you see there on the screen that all residential evictions are limited to those that are necessary, the very few that are necessary to preserve public health and safety. And the evictions and disconnection of public utility services is limited under that same purpose, only for those that are necessary for public health and safety for at least through this month. And Boulder County, per the order of the Chief Judge, Judge Bakke, postponed evictions for non-payment of rent during this time. Now, of course, nothing in the state order relieves tenants from their obligation to pay any rent that accrues during this time period. So I imagine if someone's able to pay rent, there's some incentive here to keep up with rent. But what the governor has ordered is that no one could be evicted during this time period, given the health crisis, unless it's in the name of public health and safety. So we have a page, a flyer on our website that details what the order requires, what the rights of landlords and tenants are, and what resources are available. I would note the number of mediation services we have available in Boulder County, as some of you know. So we have City of Boulder Community Mediation Service. The City of Longmont has a mediation service. Boulder County Legal Services, of course, and the Boulder County Bar Association has a directory of local law resources. And I think these are really important resources that are available even now, because I recognize that this is not an easy issue for landlords and certainly not for tenants. And not every landlord has 100 units and is a millionaire. So landlords are also struggling to pay their bills. So I think right now, reaching out to one another, communicating and offering mediation, if necessary, is an important piece of this. And there are some folks who specialize in housing issues and landlord-tenant issues, and I would encourage you to reach out to them as well. And tomorrow's free CLE will be dealing with landlord-tenant issues if you have any questions. That program starts at noon, and you could sign up via the Bar Association website. So if that's an area of interest, if this is an area of interest, I really encourage you to attend tomorrow's presentation. In terms of the DA's office, if there's a landlord or housing provider that's repeatedly threatening or harassing tenants and threatening to evict them, that would be something where we'd encourage you to call law enforcement or contact the DA's office directly. And I have our contact information on the last slide of this presentation. Stimulus check scams. So we have coronavirus-related frauds and stimulus check scams that are starting up as well. And I think we've done a good job of trying to get the message out to the community, but I wanted to share these things with you as well. And there are resources available on our website. But one of the things I think that'll be particularly important is with regards to stimulus checks. And the reason I say that is because right now, with people going through this financial crisis as a result of the pandemic, there are a lot of folks who are anxiously awaiting and hoping for a stimulus check. And we're encouraging people to be alert and not lose their money or personal information to these scammers. So our staff reached out and confirmed a number of things, some of which I have here on the slide, others of which are on our website. But making sure that people know they don't have to verify any information, they don't have to pay a fee, they won't have to send in a tax form, they're not going to be asked to fill out forms to receive stimulus money, and they're not going to have to go online or call, nor will they be required to send any portion back. So these are common scams. We're already starting to see this, and I will share with you what you already know, given your profession, that anytime there's a crisis, there's going to be a small number of people who seek to profit off of that. So whether it's after 9/11 or a natural disaster or this pandemic, we're going to have these kind of scams that take place. There's a number of different frauds. We see them already where people are claiming to have a cure, a test that can be purchased online, resources that they can attain, including the stimulus checks. And these are things our community protection division has been working hard to get the word out to the community on, so that the community is not victimized, making sure people, particularly vulnerable people in our community and in our lives, are armed with the knowledge of what to do if they get a phone call or receive an email asking them to click on the link. Don't click on the link, about the coronavirus or stimulus checks. So making sure that we have people prepared for, in our community and those that we serve, that they know what behavior they can engage in, what steps they can take to protect themselves and their loved ones. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the proactive steps that were taken to limit the public presence in the courthouse. This was done based on and through the strong working relationships that we have in Boulder County. So I'm very grateful to be in a community and to be district attorney in a county where we have such strong working relationships between law enforcement, the DA's office, the public defender's office, and the judicial system. And I really want to acknowledge Chief Judge Bakke. She moved very quickly and decisively, unlike other courthouses in the state, to limit the public presence in the courthouse. I know that there are other jurisdictions that still have people coming into the courthouse for hearings at a time where we're not supposed to gather with others. And I appreciate that in this jurisdiction, quick action was taken to limit how many people would have to come to the courthouse on any given day. Because I think to do nothing at that point would have been reckless. And I think the proactive steps that Chief Judge Bakke and we were able to take definitely helped the public, helped the attorneys, those that we would have come to the courthouse as witnesses or clients, as defendants, and also our staffs. So I really respect and appreciate the steps that were taken to limit the public presence here in the courthouse in Boulder County. And as you may recall, at the time that Boulder County announced all jury trials were being suspended, the Colorado Supreme Court was still saying that jury trials should take place. And that was in early to mid-March. And I think, quite frankly, it would have been a mistake for us in Boulder County to have 150, 200 people coming into the jury assembly room, assuming they would even show up during the pandemic, and have to deal with the ensuing impact to their health and also our opportunity to run the courthouse effectively. So we quickly moved to video appearances for all parties and limited cases to those that are essential during this time. And I do want to stress that for the individuals involved in cases, the witnesses, the attorneys, and prospective jurors, I think these were really positive steps. I'll talk more in a couple minutes about the transition back to what I think will be normal operations and how that transition might look. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I certainly do not have all the answers. But I think it's interesting to start thinking about, as we have, how we're going to handle that transition back and what is it going to mean. So for example, what is it going to mean when one of your clients says, I don't feel comfortable coming to the courthouse? Or a prospective juror says, I can't be here today because I'm worried about my own health. Or we have witnesses or clients who are refusing to come to the courthouse or asking about what safety mechanisms and health precautions we're taking here in the courthouse. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But proactive steps were taken to limit the public presence in the courthouse. And I'm very glad that we did so. I think that was the absolute right thing to do. And now, just a few weeks later, it might seem like the obvious thing to do. At the time, Chief Judge Bakke was one of the first judges in the state of Colorado to do so. And I applaud her for taking that step. And I'm glad that we were able to do it along with the Public Defender's Office, DA's office, and the Sheriff's Office. We also took decisive action to reduce the jail population. So on an average day, the Boulder County jail population ranges from anywhere from 420 to 500 people in the jail. And as you know, given who's on this call, the jail population is different than the population in state prison, in that the jail population has people going in and coming out every single day. And I'm referring to the offenders. given the short amounts of time that they're in the jail. We also have jail staff, medical staff, the attorneys, and visitors and community members to think about in terms of the jail and trying to limit the impact that the virus could have on the offenders in the jail and the ensuing impact it could have on the community. Because without testing being available for all of us, it would be highly likely that someone in the jail could contract the virus, be released back into the community, and only further the spread in Boulder County. So it's a careful balancing of public safety, community health, and the treatment and rights of those who are incarcerated. But we were very motivated to try to move as quickly as we could in Boulder County to reduce the jail population. So as you could see from the slide, on the day before, I shouldn't say the day before the crisis hit, the jail population was at 435. In Boulder County, the jail population is now at approximately 240. And I'm just going to take you through a couple things we've done to try to reduce the jail population. So very early on, Boulder County law enforcement began issuing summonses whenever appropriate instead of booking people into the jail. So for a greater number of offenses, more types of offenses, law enforcement was issuing summonses and citations to individuals who could have been arrested and booked into the jail. The sheriff, in collaboration with law enforcement and the district attorney's office, also changed the arrest standards for what would be allowed for individuals who would be allowed to be booked into the jail. So in other words, the sheriff came up with a list, and it's been shared with the court, of offenses for which individuals would not be accepted into the jail. And that was done in addition to the work law enforcement had already done to limit how many folks were being arrested, to further limit anybody who was going to be booked into the jail. We also reviewed all offenders who have pre-existing medical conditions and as a result have compromised immune systems. What I mean by that is individuals who had medical conditions predating and unrelated to the virus, who were at a greater risk of contracting the virus if the virus hits the jail or when the virus hits the jail. Up to this point, we haven't had anybody with the virus in the Boulder County Jail, although I'm sure you've read media accounts about other jails where it's had an impact. So one example from over the weekend that I saw was they have over 300 offenders in the jail in Cook County, right outside Chicago. 300 offenders and approximately 115 jail staff who've now contracted the virus. So we took steps, including the steps on the slide that I have there, to reduce the jail population, starting with the individual's pre-existing medical conditions. And we quickly moved then to analyze the individual cases of any offender who had fewer than 45 days left to serve on their sentence. The idea there being if you had someone serving a sentence, let's say for trespass or DUI, and they have less than 20 days to go, we could either leave them in for the full 20 days, thereby exposing them to 20 days of risk of getting the virus, or we could move to reduce their sentence and ask the court to reduce their sentence so that they could be released early. And that's what we did in any case where we determined the individual did not pose a significant risk to community safety. So we reviewed each and every individual case in these categories with an eye on, does this person, based on the history or the offense itself, present a significant risk to the community safety? As you know, this is a very inexact science, but we went through each and every case deliberately to try to figure out, to the best of our ability, which ones should be released. So we looked at all the individuals with fewer than 45 days left to serve on their sentence. We reviewed all the offenders in on bond to see which one should be transferred to or modified to personal recognizance bonds. We also came up with a list in collaboration with the Public Defender's Office. The Public Defender and I then submitted the list to Chief Judge Bakke for her approval of stipulated PR bonds for a variety of offenses, and I'm happy to share that list with you if you need it for your work. So these individuals would immediately receive PR bonds if they were booked into the jail based on the nature of the offense. We also went through all the in-custody work release inmates and either recommended a release or a transfer to electronic home monitoring, or home arrest as it's known in layperson terms, in an effort, again, to reduce those individuals from the jail population. That was one of the easier groups in some ways to look at, in that the work release individuals, as you undoubtedly know, are out in the community already during the day and go back to the jail at night. So they'd be a direct transfer between the jail and the community. The goal here being to reduce the jail population before the virus hits. And the thing that I've talked about a lot in the community with individuals who've questioned this is we have to recognize that if the virus hit the jail, it would spread like wildfire at a time where we're all taking these significant steps to limit our contact with others. I mean, many of you, I imagine, are home right now. All of us are really careful about who we're coming into contact with. If you're on the trail for a run, you're supposed to be more than 6 feet away. All these steps that we all know are completely contradicted by the population in the jail, where they had 435 people in very close confines in jeopardy of getting the virus themselves and becoming really sick or perhaps dying. And then the same would be true for jail staff, medical staff, attorneys, and so on. So one of the things we also focused on is what support could be provided to individuals who are being released from the jail. So Boulder County Probation, Boulder County Community Justice Services, which is also known as pretrial services, both engage with offenders who they had connections with or would have connections with to try to provide as much support as they can during this time, make sure that individuals are still being supported and monitored to keep them hopefully on the right track. And then we had a group called Focus Reentry, which is a nonprofit organization here in Boulder County, and they do terrific work connecting with offenders before they were released from the jail, giving them backpacks with some resources, but also information on healthcare benefits and services in case, in the event they were being released from the jail and not readily able to connect with those services. So all those things were done in Boulder County, and this was a couple weeks ago. And I imagine you may feel the same way, but every day during this period seems like a long time, and sometimes the delay of weeks can make a big difference. So I'm grateful that we took those steps as quickly as we did in Boulder County. The Defense Bar and the ACLU had recently filed Rule 21 petitions with the Colorado Supreme Court. There were 2 petitions filed. One was about courthouse operations, and the second was about the jail population. Both of those petitions were very quickly denied by the Colorado Supreme Court. The courthouse operations petition, I'd have to go back and check, but I believe everything we've done in Boulder County has already met or surpassed the request in that Rule 21 as to courthouse operations. Similarly, and I appreciate the Public Defender's Office reaching out to us before filing the petition and talking to us about what we've done here in Boulder County. A lot of, if not most of, the request in the petition with regards to the jail population, that second one, had also been addressed here in Boulder County. There are some differences here and there, but for the most part, courthouse operations and jail population were things we've done here in Boulder County. And I'm glad we had, because the Colorado Supreme Court did not provide direction on those things, other than to refer people to the governor's announcement, which included suggestions and recommendations for different jurisdictions to try to limit the public presence in the courthouse and also to reduce the jail population. As you might be aware, the Department of Corrections is also taking steps, along with a lot of other local jurisdictions now, to reduce the incarcerated population. So in the Department of Corrections, they're looking at offenders who are within 6 months of their PED, so parole eligibility date. Within 6 months of that date, they're looking at individuals who've committed non-VRA offenses. And by that, for those of you who don't practice criminal law, I mean offenses that are not covered by the Victim Rights Act in Colorado, which affords victims the opportunity to be notified and also to be heard before any release decision would be made. So the Department of Corrections is focusing on non-VRA offenses. The one exception at this point from the Department of Corrections is for those that are applying for special needs, what's often referred to as medical needs parole. And for those offenses, they'll also be eventually looking at VRA offenses as part of those possible releases. That information is all available on DOC's website. So I believe I've summarized it accurately, but if you want to look at the full summary from DOC, you can go on their website and they outline what timeline they're looking at in terms of release date and what level of offense they're looking at in terms of eligibility for potential early release by the Department of Corrections. All right, the return to normal. On some days that seems like a long way off, doesn't it? Since I can't see you, I picture you nodding and saying, yes, it does. But what I wanted to talk about briefly is something I do not have the answers for, but we've been putting a lot of thought into here in the DA's office, and that's how we make the transition back and how we make the transition back to normal operations. And I'm a sports fan, so, and I think, I know I'm not supposed to talk about sports when I give a presentation, but I'm going to make an exception during this exceptional time. And part of what motivates me to think long-term here is when I listen to the news about major sports leagues and whether or not they're going to be able to get up and running again this year, it makes me take a long view as a person in the justice system about what does that mean for us? If we're talking about the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball not being able to get back to normal anytime soon, and perhaps not this year, what does that say to us? How should we start to think about how do we protect our staff? How do we protect the people coming to the courthouse? And what should we anticipate in terms of what that calendar looks like? And I would anticipate that it's going to be a slow and phased transition on the way back. The Longmont courthouses are going to remain closed through the month of April. And I would anticipate us not having trials until the month of June. And I think over that time, we'll start to transition back in terms of what hearings are able to be held and how that works. And we'll still hopefully get some direction from the state on that. I'm confident, though, for the reasons I've already hit on, that even absent the direction from the state, that we have the strong working relationships here in Boulder County and people who are willing to make decisions and committed to doing the best they can, even during uncertain times, that we'll have a plan in place. One issue that remains open is speedy trial calculations. The Colorado Supreme Court had an opportunity perhaps to address that and did so by saying that the legislature should address that. And I'm optimistic that the legislature is going to take a close look at it when they return to session in May. I will say here in this jurisdiction that I'm very grateful that the public defenders and the members of the district attorney's office have had really productive discussions about waiving or tolling the speedy trial time. I think the more we can have those discussions and the more we can work those out in individual cases to the extent possible, the less necessary it is for the legislature to take action, at least as far as I'm concerned. So I appreciate that in Boulder County, I think we've had overall really productive discussions between the public defender's office and the district attorney's office about waiving and tolling time when we can. And obviously that's a complex question in every case, and it involves the individual offender, it involves where we're at with the case, what kind of case it is. I recognize that. But to generalize, those conversations between the public defenders and the district attorneys have been really productive. And I appreciate that, because I think the more we can do on that kind of level, the less need there is for anything from the state or from the legislature. And I appreciate those working relationships. And overall, as I wrap up, I will say that we're definitely going to get through this. It's just going to be a long haul. And I come to the office every day knowing that we have an obligation for those we serve to try to make this as steady as possible and to continue to resolve cases and maintain strong working relationships during this crisis, and do everything we can to address what will inevitably be a backlog of cases, but also to make sure that we're still meeting the needs of the community and meeting the needs of those that rely upon us here in the criminal justice system. And one thing I'm mindful of is the ripple effect that we all have on those around us. So in our families, our offices, and in our community, the opportunity we have to try to help people get through this process, not just as attorneys, but as people. So forgive me for the public service message at the end of this presentation, but I'm just reminded of that every single day, because I know that stress affects everyone during this crisis, even those of us who think we're, never going to get stressed. This is the kind of thing that has an impact on all of us. And I would just urge us all to be patient with one another, patient with our staff and colleagues, but also patient with opposing counsel. And I think that's going to be true over the next several months. I already see it occasionally. I'll see someone from the community upset about the release of individuals from the jail. Or I'll see someone upset about, whether or not they had a client released from the jail, or whether someone got back to them in a timely fashion. And some of those communications, I feel like, carry with them a certain level of emotion that are undoubtedly influenced, as I am too, by the crisis around us. So I try to remind myself every day, and since I'm talking to you, I share it with you today, that this crisis impacts everyone, and that we should be there for one another to help us get through it as well as we can and as positively as we can. So for more information, you can see there we have the website information, you have the phone number, the DA's general phone number is there on the screen. The phone number is not being answered live, but is being checked at different points throughout the entire day. And I encourage you to reach out to us if we could be of any assistance. I really hope you're continuing to be safe and stay healthy. And let me know, let us know what we could do to help you. I really appreciate, we have a couple questions up here. We have a question from Shanna. Is there any way or need for us to be helping with the homeless population in Boulder County that could be of assistance to your office and the community? I would say definitely. And I'm going to give you my email address now. I would encourage you to email me directly if that's something you'd be willing to help with. And I'll connect you with the folks who work in the with the homeless community directly. And there are a number of things that you could definitely do. My email address is mdougherty@bouldercounty.org. So it's MDOUGHERTY @bouldercounty.org. And I'll connect you with individuals who help the homeless population in Boulder County, because I know they would really appreciate your assistance during this time. So a question from Trina. Hi, Trina. Have you seen any significant changes in crime reporting other than burglary numbers and public health order violations? That is a great question, and that's one thing I wanted to touch on. So I really am somewhat fascinated. We don't have enough data yet to answer the question directly, but what we're starting to see is in city of Boulder, a dramatic increase in the residential and commercial burglaries. It's obviously highly concerning. If I had to hazard a guess as to why that's happening, I would say that it's with fewer people out on the streets at night and fewer people in the community throughout the day, that there are individuals who are going to take perhaps the opportunity, take advantage of that silence to commit crimes that may not be committed otherwise. So we've seen burglaries go up. We've seen a host of other offenses going down. There have actually been very few arrests. So it's really interesting to think about, because I think it captures the human condition somewhat, the good and the bad, about different things that happen during this crisis. By good, I mean all the positive things that are happening, like Shanna's question about helping the homeless, for example, all the volunteer work that's being done, all the efforts to help other people, but also just, some observations. We have, and for those of you in the criminal justice system, you know this to be true, so many cases start with the following. They were in a bar, and then whether it's a DUI or an assault or a sex assault, whatever it might be, we're seeing fewer of those cases. And I think it's just because there are fewer people out in the community right now and fewer people at bars at night. And as a result, less alcohol-induced behavior that might lead someone to get themselves in trouble with the justice system. So we've seen a decrease in those things. I think we're going to see an increase in domestic violence. I think it's a fascinating question, and I think it's something that we're definitely going to continue to monitor it. We haven't seen any other increases in crime reporting at this point. And I also want to share with you that the burglary numbers that we've seen in the city of Boulder are different than what we've seen in the city of Longmont. So Longmont has gone down over this same period. So I also don't want to rush to any conclusions based on one city or another and what their data reflects. I do think people in the community will likely have questions about whether the release of the jail population has led to an increase in crime at all. And that's something we'll look at, and we'll be transparent and honest with the community about tracking that data. I will tell you that I think it's inevitable that between the people being released from the Department of Corrections and other jurisdictions around Colorado, as well as here in Boulder, it's inevitable that some of the people who are granted early release are going to commit additional criminal offenses, and I recognize the responsibility for that. I also recognize that we're in an extraordinarily difficult time, and we need to make these decisions to do our very best to protect the safety and health of the community. So it will be interesting to see how that data plays out as well. So Stuart has a good question, and it's a question I had a meeting about yesterday, Stuart, so I appreciate you raising it. Stuart's question is, are you going to say more about the practical issues you raised earlier about getting back to trials? Will jurors be willing to participate? Will we make them? What about witnesses and expert witnesses? So this is one of those areas where I don't have all the answers, and certainly not yet. I can tell you from my perspective that what we're going to do as an office is start to prepare for these conversations. So what I mean by that is I have a couple folks on staff who are going to start thinking about a couple things. First, having health precautions available to people who come to the DA's office. So part of what we talked about here in the DA's office yesterday is having hand sanitizers, wipes, and masks available for visitors to the DA's office. Now we're talking about a month or two away from now, but I want to be prepared for when that happens, so that if I have a witness on my case who says, I won't come down to the DA's office, I can say, well, here's what we have available to you. If we have these things available in the DA's office and in every courtroom, is that something that will allow you to feel more comfortable coming to the courthouse? And being prepared to have those things in place is something we're already working on. Also, with witnesses, we're going to have to evaluate whether they play a critical role in the case and what options we have if they still refuse to come down after that, and what options we believe are appropriate. I think with jurors, it's going to have to include a conversation with the bench, and I want to recognize the role of the judges in this process. I will say from my perspective that we're going to have our staff ready to have those conversations during voir dire. So if someone raises their hand during jury selection, if they haven't already raised it with the clerk, and they raise their hand and say, I don't feel comfortable being here, I don't want to be here. How do we handle that? I don't have the perfect answer, but that's something we're definitely going to be prepared for. Excuse me. Am I the only one who, when he coughs now, worries that everybody's going to think I'm sick? I'm fine. I'm just running out of steam here in the conversation. But I'm reminded, I'll say what I said at the start, which is being in downtown Manhattan on 9/11, that trial was supposed to start, the opening did not happen that morning. And when the courthouse was back and open for business, it was different in terms of what we're going through right now in a couple of respects, especially and perhaps, most significantly, after 9/11, we had some set start date where, okay, on this day, courtrooms are all going to be open and trials will resume and everything's going to be back to normal. Normal, however, being the National Guard was, literally checking people into downtown Manhattan. I had to show my ID to someone who had a machine gun every morning to get into my office. But we knew there was a date certain. We don't have that here. It's going to be different with this crisis. But I also recognize that when that trial started up, we had only 9 of the 12 jurors show up for jury duty that morning, and no one had an answer as to what do we do? Do we declare a mistrial? Do we not? Do we have someone go force those 3 jurors to come down so we have a complete jury to start the trial? Those are questions we're going to make sure we have the answers to before we get started here in Boulder County. And I'm confident, given who we have as chief judge and the public defender, that we'll be able to get that set up in advance. So I think some of these are questions we don't have answers to, but I can tell you we're absolutely committed to figuring it out before we have people sitting in the courtroom raising their hands and us not knowing what to say. Okay, I think that's all the questions. I'm going to give you my email address again, and then I'm going to let you go on with this beautiful day. So my email address is mdougherty@bouldercounty.org, MDOUGHERTY @bouldercounty.org. My direct line is 303-441-3798. You see the other contact information on the screen there. And I have another chat question here. Oh, and it's from Jonathan. Jonathan, thank you. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with all of you today. And I recognize we covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, but I also really want to thank Laura and Kyle and the Boulder Bar Association for what they're doing. I think this is really important for all of us to have an opportunity to get together and for these sessions to be available. I encourage you to check out the Bar Association website. And I know we're all getting emails from them about different things that, different sessions that they have coming up in the near future. And I think that's terrific. I think it's a way for us to stay connected and also for us to keep learning and see what's going on in the legal community during this difficult time. I really meant what I said earlier. We're definitely going to get through this, 100%. And as attorneys, whatever field you're in, we have a unique opportunity to impact those we serve and to help our clients and the community through this difficult time. So I really appreciate all of you and what you do. in this special community in which we live. And I recognize that Trina has put up the Boulder County Public Health Call Center. It's also available on our website too. That number is 720-776-0822. It's available in the chat box there. If you have questions, anything related to public health, the stay-at-home orders, what people can or can't do during this strange time that we're living in, I encourage you to reach out to public health. We're really lucky in Boulder County to have such an outstanding public health department. They do fantastic work. Jeff Zayak is the director for Boulder County. I really appreciate how transparent and communicative he's been with our community throughout this entire time. All right. Well, seeing no further questions, I'll let you go on to enjoy this day. I hope you're getting outside. I hope you're taking care of yourselves. And thanks so much for joining me today. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, sir. Again, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.